Most of you are aware that we recently conducted a national online survey of all of our local churches and as many people as possible within those churches. The reason we did this is so that we could find out how we were doing relative and with respect to what are our stated goals or values, what we believe in, what we say we feel called to. Now, the reason for this was quite simple, and that is that if we don't evaluate ourselves by the right standards and use the right measurements, then we will certainly evaluate ourselves against standards which aren't nearly so helpful. In the local church, our default measurements are usually twofold: people and budgets. Now, all of us would recognize, or at least we would say, that these aren't the best measurements to be able to ascertain church health or the quality of its future or its relevance to their calling in God. Nevertheless, it's what we always fall back on in the absence of any intentional evaluation in another direction. Now, so if I asked most of our pastors or many people in our churches today, how are we doing? I think that often the answer would be, well, I don't think we're doing very well. There's a general malaise that exists within our movements. Some of that, or perhaps much of it, is because of really our past. We were born in renewal in times of many people flocking into our meetings and as a result, many dollars being put into our budgets. We had numbers of early church planting stories that were probably not very realistic or sustainable outside of a white-hot renewal environment. And so one of our churches began and had 300 people show up to their first service. Pretty hard to sustain those kinds of realities outside of those environments. So is it true? Are we not doing well? Part of our reason in conducting the survey was so that we could find the answer to that question. But I know that we could only find out whether or not that was true by measuring the things that we say that we are committed to. So what did we discover in the survey? Well, first of all, we discovered some things about who we are. We are 75% Caucasian. Now, that would perhaps not be surprising to any of us, but it is encouraging in a way in that we're beginning to become perhaps a little more multicultural, a little more diverse in our community. Approximately 6% of our people are Francophones, 3% are of Aboriginal descent. It's a start and something that we can certainly build and grow upon. A second thing that we discovered is that we've gone through incredible turnover. 50% of our people are new to us in the last 5 years. But we are we've been becoming younger. We have now more people under 40 than we have over 40. One other encouraging thing we discovered about ourselves is that for 20% of our community, their present Vineyard is their first ever church. All of these things are encouraging. So within this community that we call the Vineyard, what are the greatest strengths that emerged from our online survey? Well, the first shouldn't be surprising, and that is our relationship with God. We have, as an overall national community, a very strong desire to know God, to experience Him, and indeed, most would respond, over 70% of our people would say they have a strong present experience of God and a vibrant relationship with Him. Secondly, that translates into our communities. We have by and large, strong, unified communities. And within those communities, we have a strong and an increasing desire to grow in discipleship so that we would grow in character and grow in following Jesus and grow together in that dynamic. Probably the third thing that stood out for us was that we have an increasing outward focus, that these are not just communities that are focused in and centered in upon themselves. Probably over 70% of our people are beginning to be intentional about turning a major part of their energies outside of the church. This is evidenced by the the number of significant friendships that our people have with those that don't yet know Jesus. It's strong and it's growing. Evangelism is extremely important. Over 86% of our people would say this is an important aspect of church life, that it's not enough just to enjoy great relationship with God and with one another. Even in the area of church planting, which has been a struggle for us over the last 5 years. Over half of our people think that this is an essential aspect of community life. And probably almost 30% of our people say that they would seriously consider joining a church plant so that they could be a part of this way of seeing Jesus come to more people. It doesn't mean, of course, though, that all is a rosy picture, that everything is a strength. We have indeed some significant challenges, even in the areas of what I've listed as our strengths. First of all, in relationship with God, while we have considerable experience of God, one thing we discovered is that this isn't well anchored in either the Word of God or in spiritual disciplines. And so it becomes vulnerable. And it's certainly something that we want to strengthen. In the area of community life, while it's significantly important to us and it's a rich experience for us, what we are not finding is that we're seeing a lot of expression of spiritual gifts functioning in our relationships with one another. So those things that God has called us to, those ways in which we feel that He's formed us and wants to work through us, is not being adequately released in our interrelationships. And this is something that we want to improve upon. We're not seeing that our community life, that the strength of community is translating into our task of raising our children or into our marriages. And we want to see more carryover, more transfer there of us really helping one another in these central aspects of our lives. Finally, in the area of mission, probably the expression that applies is the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. We want to become more missional. We want to become more intentional about it. I think our hearts have become convinced that this is an important aspect of what it means to be the church, but we're not very well mobilized yet. And this is going to take some very careful thinking and planning and co-working. Another thing that's challenging for us is that one of the primary characteristics of the Vineyard movement at its outset was that we have been given the ministry of Jesus in all aspects of his ministry, which includes works of power, that we would do all the things that he did. And yet what we found is there isn't a great strong foundation of faith to go out and heal the sick and cast out demons and break bondages and see these works of power that we read about in the New Testament translated through our lives. And this is something that we want to continue to work very strongly towards. But if I back up from that and say, where are we going? Where do we see movement? In this dimension, I'm very encouraged, because what I see is that we really are moving in the right direction. It's not meteoric, but it's very, very positive. And we see that in a variety of ways. Almost over 70% of our people will say that they've grown spiritually in the last 2 years, and 1/5 of our people will say that spiritual growth has been dramatic. Well, that's got to be a sign of increasing health in the future. Over 90% of our people are saying that their community, local church community, has become more important to them over the last 2 years. And this again means that we're well positioned for our future. If we ask the question, we did ask the question, have you and your church become more intentionally missional over the last 2 years? Over 70% said yes to both. And again, these are positive signs.